Everybody may have been seeing some news about extraterrestrials or UAPs, which is the updated terminology to replace UFOs. So it means unidentified aerial phenomenon. And that is because that update needed to be made because the old terminology was UFO, right? Unidentified flying object. And aerial phenomenon is much more broad because our notion of what these phenomenon are has been broadened. It's not just flying objects. There's other things that may be happening in the sky. And if you guys noticed in the last week or so, there's been government hearings on this UAP phenomenon going in and out of the ocean with government agents and generals verifying this. Of course, they're all sworn to secrecy at various levels. So they really can't get into details. And for me, the interesting question is not, do extraterrestrials exist or not? The question revolves around, what does that mean for me? What does this suggest for me? And now for the last 10 to 20 years, this has been something that I've looked into tremendously. I've read books written by extraterrestrials and interdimensional beings. I've seen interviews with government generals. I've seen interviews with countless people who are just regular people who saw something weird. I have experienced on multiple occasions interdimensional consciousness that has made itself known within my reality. Whether we're alone in this universe or not is a very difficult thing to answer, because then we really have to define what we mean by alone. We have to define what we mean by life. We have to define what we mean by this reality or this universe. And all of that gets really muddy when you start thinking about things from the perspective of another entity. Even if you just start thinking about it from the perspective of another life form on this planet, things get muddied. Things are not the same as we think about things. So when you think about vision of a bee, it's completely different than vision that we experience things. Even our dogs see things completely different than we do. Dogs see motion different. My dog can be walking through my house and then, like, not even looking in the same direction, but a squirrel across the street jumping on a tree, it'll notice, because dogs have very good sensation for movement, which was going to serve that animal if we take an evolutionary perspective. Now, when you think about extraterrestrial, aliens, interdimensional beings, what if they're not subjected to the same laws of physics that we are? And it's really difficult for us humans to imagine that, because we are using tools that are subjected to the laws of reality that these tools exist in. So for instance, physical matter. Most of our tools are made from and are measuring physical matter. But we know that physical matter is not the only thing that is measurable. We didn't know that in the past. There's fields of energies that we can sense into the past and into the future, torsion fields being one of them. There's also signals within our own body, our heart, for instance, that can detect into the future. We know from the Mandela effect that our past is seemingly changing. Now, just back to the heart thing, there's what are they called? Precognition. If you look into precognition studies, you'll find studies of people hooked up to machines, which are measuring our physical sensations, but we can infer from these precognition studies that our heart has an ability to detect future events. And one type of study where they do this is random image generators, where you have somebody looking at a random image that is generated by the machine. And some of these images are of death and destruction, and some of the images are pleasant. And our body is going to respond to that. Our heart is going to respond to that. Now, the machine that's randomly generating these images is doing it on a timer, and the heart is actually reacting to the future image before the machine that's randomly picking the image picks it. And this can infer that the heart is reaching, or there's something in this future reality that is reaching and impacting the heart. We also know that there really is no separateness. What we used to think of as separate objects, we can see is really just fluctuations in one energy field. Now, when we think about linear time with the past, present, and the future, this is also how a lot of our scientific studies are done. Cause and effect. There is a cause that happened in the past that is affecting the future. And then you take linear time, and if you can infer that the heart is somehow in now, the present moment, detecting something that's happening in the future, we can look at other science that proclaims that linear time is but an illusion. It is a construct. It is a program that we, at the density of consciousness that we are at, are perceiving. We are perceiving a theoretical past in the present moment and projecting into a theoretical future. There was never, ever a past that any of us has ever experienced. We've only ever experienced the present moment, ever. We've only ever been, in terms of time, we've only ever been here now. It's always just been a now moment for us. Anything that we think about in the past is a projection from now. And the way that I construct that is that the past that we are in was also a now that is then existing now. Now, the question with aliens and interdimensional entities is, how do they travel? Because we're thinking about it from a human standpoint. How do they travel? Because we travel through physical space, and we're subject to laws like inertia, and we don't understand how these aerial phenomenon are moving at tens of thousands of times the G-forces that a human body or even a craft can sustain. We don't have mastery over in a bubble, let's call it, a field of energy that can come with us and make turns and acceleration and decelerations at the speed that we're seeing these UAPs travel. It doesn't make sense to us. We think it's a technology. It may very well be a physical technology that also utilizes, let's call it, dimensions outside of our current awareness. We also have a question, and I mean we by meaning the little bit that's been disclosed to the public. These scientists or these generals that have access to these secret programs, I almost called it secret space programs, you'll hear in the questioning that they'll get to a point where they're like, oh, I am not at authorization to disclose any information about that, or I cannot talk to you about that in public, or I can talk to you about this in private, because there's regulations that they have. And so the little bit that's disclosed to us is very easy to find on your own, by the way. But I also have access to people that, let's say one of these people, his job is to find back doors in the security system of government. And so if his job is to hack into the government, into the military files to expose weaknesses in these military files, then obviously he's going to hack in and go look at interesting things for him. And even though they're monitoring him and he gets slapped on the wrist sometimes, that's his job, is to go in and search these secret files. So there's people like this that exist. There's people like this that talk to other people. There's people like this that talk on video to other people that aren't so worried. Well, they're all worried, but they're not currently under contract in a way that they are fearful that they're going to get fired or get cut out of the mix. I'm getting through all of this to basically say that when you think about another density of being or another dimension of being, it's likely that they are from another phase of reality where they have access to different and or more parts of reality than we have access to. And what we see in this reality is a fraction. It's a reduced experience from what is actually happening. So what I mean by that is if you imagine consciousness ascending through us, right? So we are a collection of minerals, we're a collection of air, we're a collection of light, we're a collection of microorganisms, we're a collection of water, we're a collection of lots of elements that even from a religious standpoint, God is within all, right? Omnipresent. Omnipresent means it's within everything. It's everywhere. Omnipotent. These are words that describe God. Omnipotent means all powerful. So including all of the power that there is. And omniscience. Omniscience is another way of saying that, meaning all-knowing. So everywhere, all-powerful, and all-knowing. These are some words that are used to describe these religious deities. And it's also used to describe, in the scientific community, it's used to describe energy. It's everywhere, it has all the information, and it is all-powerful. It is the power. It is the power. And so if you look at us, we have this same energy force that's flowing through us in many different ways. The air, the water, the minerals, the light, it's all mixed together, and then there's us. And that's the focal point that we're existing in. We're the focal point that's made up of all of these different consciousness aspects. Some of it's in our bacteria, in our gut, some of it's in our actual living tissue, our fascia, some of it's in the air, the light, and is all combining into this human experience that we're having. Take a step back from that, and we just have the air. Is the air alive? Well, you just go back to the definition of, even in religion, is there God in air? Is there omnipresence, omnipotent, omniscience? Yes, it's all still within that. We cannot separate consciousness from that. So the minerals, the bacteria, all conscious. Different focal point of consciousness, we have an awareness of a cell in our body. Our liver cell is aware. It has its own life. It lives, it dies, it replicates, it protects itself, it eats, it excretes. It has all of the components of life. Minerals come from the earth. You can see all of the thinking mechanisms of life in the totality of earth. There's a paper, it's called Gaian theory, Gaia, Gaia, This is the personality of Earth. And that paper is written, it's a Harvard paper. So you can read about Gaian theory, that the Earth in totality is a living organism. And that would be like a zoom out from us. So we are a cell of Earth. And there's different stages that our awareness goes. Right now, we're in this phase where we're individual human cells. We call it selves. And eventually we are graduated to be able to be aware of all of ourselves. This is what we call awakening. We become conscious. We become aware that we are a mind, a body, a thing behind the mind. We are the observer, we are the controller, we are the creator, all happening within this individual self. And then there's even an enhanced awareness within our dreams. Some of us are sleeping when we're dreaming. Some of us are sleeping when we're awake. But then when we wake up from the dream, like Neo taking the red pill, we wake up and we become aware of our situation here. The same thing can happen when we're dreaming, when we're sleeping. We become aware. We become aware, as this comment here, of the matrix, even in our dreams. And then that opens us up to the possibility of being aware of others. And that's where we're going as a human race. We'll become aware of other selves. Just like the cells in our body are most likely aware of other cells. Just like the bee is aware of the entire hive. Just like if you go onto islands and find tribes, they don't use cell phones, they don't use technology, they don't use GPS. They're aware that their homie is stuck underneath a log about to drown in the river. They get that awareness, they're connected, they go. You go to, there's a book called The Wayfinders, where these islanders are on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and they can tell from the ocean where the islands are hundreds of miles away. If they're going 1 degree off, they're going to miss their target by dozens of miles. I can't remember properly, but I think what they do is they actually tie a rope from the front of the boat or canoe, and they hook it to their testicles, something like that. And they're the way showers or way finders. If you read the book series, The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, you'll see explorers, scientifically minded men, went over into the East and they started interacting with people that had abilities to transcend our understanding of physics. They could teleport. They literally could dissolve in their current state, where a group of these scientifically minded white people would be, and they would write down, this person just dissolved on the couch. He just disappeared. And then there would be another group of these white men 200 miles away, and they'd be like, at this time on this day, this guy just appeared in the forest in front of us. And so obviously afterwards they compare notes and they start seeing what actually happened. And I believe almost all these people died before these documents were released. It was decades later, because they knew it wouldn't be accepted because of science, because of the dogma that we have around science. So when it comes to extraterrestrials, there's all these people that know all of these things. There's just no use to release it out into the public because the public isn't ready to comprehend it. They're not ready to accept it. They're not ready to implement what it suggests. And I feel, just to cut the chase, I feel what it suggests is that we are all responsible for everything. We are the creator, the observer, the game player. We're going through this all together. And it's not me versus you. Like, everything in our programming is taught us. This is why sports are one of the most pushed programming on youth, on adults. This is a part of our entire philosophy. You versus me, and we're trying to win the game. Capitalism is the same thing, and this is how we progress as a species, is through competition. We're just not ready to create a different way, a different collaboration. This would be like if we thought of our sensation of self as a whole, it would be like my skin cell here fighting against my skin cell here, and them trying to destroy each other to get ahead, or all the cells in our body doing that same thing, which I guess, as I'm saying that, do to a degree. And they collaborate. We're just missing the collaboration part. And that was all having to do with Babel, the tower, where the humans were trying to build the launch pad and be like the gods so they can get into heaven, like they were witnessing the ETs doing. They were launching off these towers, and so they started building a tower of their own. And then the half ETs were like, well, man wants to be like us, let's take down the tower. And they said, well, let's not destroy the tower, let's have man destroy the tower. And so they separated man into all the different languages, and man then started fighting with themselves, and they destroyed the tower on their own, and they never became like the gods. That's the story of Babel. All right, so Moondays is saying that her mom just sent her a video of a UFO UAP that she captured last night. Yeah, so my son is having a lot of trouble keeping his hands to himself at school, and I'm at a loss. He wants to slap and kick when he gets frustrated. What am I doing wrong? I mean, this is where I would look at the situation and give him something to slap and kick. Put up a heavy bag in the bedroom, in the garage, in somewhere. Give him some punching bags or punching gloves, and let him slap and kick in a healthy manner. And then through that activity, we can teach him discipline. If we just tell somebody no, it's going to be very difficult for them to accept that. We must override the programming. So if punching and kicking is coming out of the being, take that, channel it into where punching and kicking goes. Punching and kicking goes into the bag. This is a sport. This is for this activity. We only use it for this activity or in a state of absolute emergency, which you don't have to worry about now. So this is a sport. This is how we use it. And now this person has context over what a punch, a kick, a slap is. And he can channel it into that. He can wait. A lot of people are going to be fearful that if you teach somebody how to punch, that they're going to then go punch things even better, which may happen if there's no discipline taught. But fighters are some of the most disciplined people on this planet, because you're no longer grasping for power when you know that you have it. This is why if you go out to the bars, you're going to see a bunch of people trying to fight each other who are just like kind of cowardly and don't even really know what they're doing. And then the people that really are the fighters are standing back silent, and they're not going to throw a punch or a kick until it's absolutely necessary. They'll usually try to diffuse the situation with words, with calmness, because they're not freaking out. They're not in danger. They don't feel in danger because they know how to protect themselves. They stand with, outside of striking range. So it doesn't matter how wild somebody's going. If you're beyond the reach of their weapons, their hands and their feet, or anything else they have, you're not in danger. So if you teach somebody about violence, then they learn about violence. You can't just say, no, don't be violent. Don't be violent. Violence is something that is being expressed through the child. So develop it, would be my 4-minute-ish answer to that question. Back to, and that has to, back to the extraterrestrial phenomenon. So what it suggests to me is that time, this is how they travel. They travel through time space at some dimensions, right? So if you imagine we have an ability to travel through physical space, there would be an ability to travel through time if we have access beyond this physical dimension. So if time is existing now, and it always has existed now, then thank you for saying thank you, everybody. Then are we, or is there a density, like a diffused version of reality, a different focal point where we can travel through time? And not that I'm promoting plant medicine psychedelics, I feel that people can grasp this when under the influence of different entities. So when you consume a plant and that entity is able to lock into your consciousness, then you have an awareness of how that plant or that plant mixture views reality. You're essentially giving that consciousness eyes and ears and a body to experience its version of reality. And through that, we can access the future. We can access the past. We can access the full universe. We can zoom in and out of consciousness. We can zoom in and out of time frames. And it's no longer like what we know of as a memory, but it's actually us being there. It's like we're actually there. This is also why they're used in therapy, because you can go back and you can rework certain scenarios in our past. You can make sense of it. You can close some of these open loops. Now back to ETs. So with this awareness that they can travel through time, that only happens if we, as a collective entity of humans, get to the point where we're no longer locked into this physical reality. And that happens in a non-physical state. And we go into a non-physical state at certain brainwave frequencies, like gamma, or even theta, or delta, when we're dreaming. And we're able to transcend this physical reality where we're no longer subject to the laws of this reality. As humans, we will eventually get there. And I'm saying this with my gnosis, and I tend not to use the language like I believe, because nobody says like I believe the sun is rising tomorrow, right? It's I mean, that statement is true, but it just doesn't hit the statement most accurately, right? The sun is going to rise tomorrow. The sun is rising tomorrow, speaking from a nonlinear standpoint. So we, as conscious entities separated into human selves, are also connected to each other, and there's a version of us, there's a zoom perspective of us that has a collective knowledge of our entire civilization. Do I have a name for that? No. I would say that this entity made up of all humans exists. And if this entity were to name itself, then we can make sense of it. Now, other entities from other planets have named themselves to make it easier for us to understand. They've even come into our physical reality and made themselves known in a physical being. One of these people is Ra, from what we know of as Egypt. Ra comes down, blue avian type figure, and says, I am Ra. Here are the keys to civilization. It's funny because all of these other civilizations throughout the entire planet had similar deities, like Viracocha, which means sea foam, and Quetzalcoatl, which means feathered serpent. And it's like they're named after the vehicles that come in. The sea foam, imagine like a ship coming through the sea. Feathered serpent, like imagine a flying object coming in. Feathered flying serpent, long, skinny object. So we have these beings coming in, and then go over into the east, it's dragon everywhere, right? Feathered serpent is a dragon. So we say, oh, they're worshiping the dragon, but they're really just worshiping the same thing that we're doing in Central and South America. And they get the answers to reality from these beings. Ra is a collection of entities, collection of humanoids that ascended from the planet Venus. And they went through this progression where they were individuals, and then they united, and they become aware of each other, and then they become aware of all their thoughts, and now they're operating as one entire collective unit, gaining all the experiences of all their different lives. And then eventually they get to the point where there's no need to have individual bodies. And then so they become this social memory complex, which is non-physical, it's etherical. And this social memory complex has all of the knowledge, the wisdom of all of the entities that have ever existed on this planet. And it's at a certain stage of evolution. And because it is progressing with the totality of everything, Ra's job is its objective is to go to the other entities such as Earth and help facilitate this same evolution with the beings on Earth. So it comes down, all the stories we have of Ra in Egypt, Ra comes down, gives the answers out to the pharaohs, and then it just mayhem happens. And they use the power to their advantage in a state of war. And they destroy themselves. Ra comes down again in the 80s, and he writes these books. They're called the Law of One series. And he writes like 4 or 5 books because there's these scientists, these engineers take a person and they use the person as an antenna, and they're gaining access to these channels that are accessing these other entities that have the ability to sense all humans. And so we are them. That's why it's called the Law of One. But there's multiple entities that they access where it seems to us like the aliens are looking down at us, but the aliens, from their perspective, they are us. That's why they can pop up in one of our consciousnesses and talk to us, because it's really just them talking to themselves. And when they understand this, they rely on this aspect. Now humans, this is the whole thing, was to get to this point. So let me finish the Ra. So then they eventually channel the entity of Ra, and he talks about in 5 books the history of the earth, where we're going as a society, where we've been, what makes up life, where we're, what's the point of this all. And he explains that we're in a phase of ascension, and we're currently in this third density, this third phase, where we're getting really good at knowing the nature of self. And the next phase after that, going to the 4th density from the chakra system, that would be the heart. The 4th density, we start to know the emotional, the feelings of others. So right now we are getting to know our emotional aspects of ourself, which is why it's so important for ourself to get intelligent emotionally, so we can learn to harness and be aware of the impact of our emotions, which I'm going all over the place here because maybe you guys go down one of these rabbit holes at some point. But then there's another book called Initiation, which is about somebody who can remember all of their past lives. Who remembers one of her lives. That's written by Elizabeth something, H or W, I think is her last name, or HW, H Walsh or something like that. And she remembers one of her past lives where she's a Pharaoh's daughter, and she goes through the initiation practice in Egypt, which is also covered in 2 books, which I think might be over there. That's called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 and Volume 2, which those are free PDFs online. It's like 700 pages. Basically, they explain the initiation practices in Egypt as well. But back to the book Initiation, there's many books called Initiation, so find the one that's written by Elizabeth. One of my favorite books, I would say top 7 favorite books, The Law of One, book 1 and 2 you want to read if you're going to read any of them. Don't just read one. 2 is the most valuable, but you need to read the first one in order to read the second one. But it's the first one is just about the history of Earth. The second one is about our own, like what it all means to us, which is the point of this whole talk. Because what do extraterrestrials mean to us is where I'm going with this. So in the book Initiation, one of the first practices they do is with emotions. There was one where they're like staring at a palm tree for something, and then eventually it was, can you bring up the emotion of anger now? And first you would do it by remembering, placing yourself in a situation where you're angry, but then it's like, okay, now can you switch to happiness and really feel and flood the body with happiness? And then can you go to guilt right now? And eventually you won't need to trigger those memories and you can just use those emotions. Now these emotions completely create reality. And those of us who are manifestors, not in the human design standpoint, but have actually embraced the skill set and the responsibility of manifesting, we know that manifesting has everything to do with our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. And our emotions have a really big part of it. So that's why it's so important to be able to fluctuate through our emotions, because an emotion is going to create a certain reality. And eventually they got really good at going, just switching without having to remember, just happiness, guilt, sadness, confusion, instantaneously be able to just create that emotional state, which is then going to allow them to color in reality with those emotional states. And it goes beyond that, but it's obviously not really something that we really have words for, or even a level of comprehension for in our current state of existence. My point is that reality is much more dynamic than we're taught. And for those of us who have woken up sometime in the last time that we've been on this planet, some of us were awake before we came here and we were born awake. Some of us, something happened. For me, it was like, it was seeing that I could predict the future when I was a kid. And then it really, like the top got blown off of everything that I knew when I started in college, started researching into things like 9/11 and just seeing that, like, oh, this whole war that we're in is not really about protection. It's about oil. And then that is even just a matrix that you step into and you're like, wow, it's not even about oil. It's not about oil at all. It's about power. And then you're like, wait, it's not about power. It's about influence. And you're like, wait, it's not about influence at all. It's about ancient extraterrestrial technology that actually influences, you can actually impact reality with these technologies, because we are reality. And there are devices and there are practices where we can access that same power. And if we know these things as a collective society, then we can actually transform reality into harmony with us. But we're not. We're distracted. We're arguing about silly things. We're taught that there's winners and losers. And so none of us wants to be a loser, even though, as Bob Marley says, the day that you win the race is the day that, something like this, the day you win the race is the day that you quit running. That doesn't seem true, but it's something like that. The day that you quit racing is the day that you win, something like that, because the race doesn't exist. We're controlled, obviously. And because you may have heard of the law of free will, The law of free will is not a law in the sense that we know it. We think of a law as like, oh, there's some entity that's governing everything that's going to punish those that don't pay attention to this law. That's how we're taught laws are. But the law of free will has nothing to do with some governing body that's making sure everybody stays in alignment. The law of free will is literally, we are all creating everything. So reality can only happen if the creators make it happen in a certain way. And that's where like this whole extraterrestrial thing has taken me, is that we are all responsible for everything. And this is the reason why they're going to drip out baby crumbs of information for 100 years. We're going to be disclosed information that's known now over the next 100 years. Right now, it's like, oh yeah, there's some things that are flying in and out of the ocean. And there's like, guys, they're digging up remains of, like, just go on Gaia and look, there's scientifically validated remains in Peru, in the Nazca lines. There's many people that have had interactions and are interacting with extra dimensional entities. Most of us right now can just close our eyes and open ourselves into a communication of something other than what we know of as ourselves. And within that pure, valid intention, it's there. But when we really ask yourself, would I be okay with that? Would I be okay with waking up in the middle of the night and then all of a sudden a 9-foot tall golden triangle headed being that doesn't even stand on a structure of a body, is just kind of floating half in and out of reality? If I came up to that at night, would that serve me? It's difficult for us to accept into that. So free will is not about a rule. It's about the fact that it's happening. And so those of us that know that accept our will as law, as reality. Those of us who are not bought into that are still bought into it. It's just somebody else's will and somebody else's intention. They are offloading their collective power to. And that's what TV is. That's what schooling is. That's what the big industries like pharmaceutical companies, that's what the designs of cities are. That's what politics are. It's us giving up our responsibility for the creation of this reality. We're giving up that responsibility to others. And in return, we get roads to drive on. We get the cars that we like. We get the clothes that we like. We get our kids educated within a school system that I don't have to do any work for. We get all these things. Easy access to food that's already prepared for us. We trade our creation abilities by accepting the gifts. It's a fair transfer of energy, and we give up our collective human power to those who are willing to take on the responsibility of creating this reality. And that's how free will works. That's how influence is important. We influence people through the media. This whole thing with ETs, I haven't even seen much. I've just seen like the little things that have popped up on Instagram and TikTok. Because the government says something, now we all feel like it's okay to believe it. And we're still just kind of believing it. Whereas we can do our own experiments and we can know it, we can live it, we can determine like, if this whole reality is actually me, can I notice that when I'm angry, things happen? When I'm sad, things happen. That matches that frequency. When I'm trusting, when I'm open, things happen. And then can we take that responsibility and really rely on it? Rely on it. Actually depend on it. Depend and decide. Cut out. Decide means to cut out the things that are not serving your creation. And are we ready for that? And it's my responsibility, it's my taking to help people with that. This is why I have my programs where I help people deal with their psyche, where I help people deal with their energy body. The kriyas that we do on my site, they're not comfortable at all. They're not comfortable at all. And so you practice in a state of uncomfortableness. Am I able to be in a meditative, open, accepting trance? Because that's what growth is. You grow through challenge. And we learn through challenge as well. And a lot of us can learn to love challenge. If we did play sports or if we did exercise, that's what it feels like. It feels like feeling a challenge, feeling the burn, and loving it. And it's opening up outside of an exercise standpoint, but exercising the energetics of the body, exercising the energetics of the mind, realizing that all of the challenging things that we went through in our life was for our own growth, not for our suffering. We want it all to get taken away. Somebody asked earlier about the child hitting things. That is an opportunity to grow. There's something that's challenging, and now we figure out this equation, and maybe this can be channeled into a more appropriate activity for the child. Maybe the child just loves to move his body, and so we get them moving the body. Maybe it starts with hitting because that's all the kid knows is like, I move this thing fast and it feels good to make it stop on something. And eventually, maybe there's an art form in there. Maybe there's something that we don't even know is going to exist in 20 years that movement is going to be important for. Maybe it's like the replacement for competitive sports, which we don't really know as a society what that's going to look like. So when we look at the things that our children are doing that are outside of the norm, it's likely that those things are the gift of the kid, right? So the kids, another example, the kids drawing on the walls all the time. You guys could probably guess, like maybe it's some sort of artistically minded person who's really creative. Help facilitate that. So we're talking like the question was like, my kid's hitting other kids in school. Well, school is the disease. Okay, school is the unnatural thing. So don't worry about so much about the rules in school. Okay, you put a bunch of people together, people are going to bump into each other, all right? And it's just not tolerable in school. And it's part of our responsibility to make sure that our kids are liked by others and respect others. I get it. But also, it's going to put force on the kid to lash out and burst into its own natural specialties. And when we get these bursts of energy in certain directions, like maybe a kid's breaking things, that's something. Like, what kind of things are they breaking? Do they like to break things? Or do they like to break things and then put them back together and rebuild them? Maybe it's, are they breaking it because they want to see how it's put together? Like maybe it's an architect, right? So we can look at these behaviors from a multi-dimensional perspective and we can say, okay, number one, how can we get this behavior to be healthier? And number two, what does this behavior mean? And it's my responsibility to help channel and facilitate an environment where this behavior can actually be more utilized in a progressing evolutionary style. So just to wrap it up, What do ETs mean? ETs mean that time is not linear because they're able to travel faster than the speed of light because they're not traveling in this physical reality. It means that there's parts of us that are greater than the self that we know. And it's up to us to experiment within that, because if we're not individually experimenting and growing as a human, then we're stalled. This life is pointless and we're going to get to come back and relive it. School, guys, school is not for empowerment. School is for training how to be a servant, how to be a, I don't even want to say it because it might be banned, but SLAVE, how to be that word. School teaches us to be an employee. School teaches us, to be okay in a jailed system where we have to ask permission to do things. Know that most of anything that you needed to know, your parents probably taught you. And anything that you needed to know, really, you learned in kindergarten. And if our school system was more like kindergarten, where we're playing, we're experimenting, we're exploring, we're asking questions, we're put in environments where we can learn on our own, that would have been school. And guess what? We all get to do that when we get out of the regular school. We do that in life. And so I invite you all to go outside, go into nature, explore. Don't get on your phone when you wake up. Don't get on your phone right before you go to sleep. Like, let your body decompress during the night. Let your body express in the morning. You'll start recognizing that the systems that we normally get into are there to hold our power down. And so it's up to us to be as much like us as possible. So that means anything system related, job, bills, even the structure of the family, anything that we view of as a responsibility, we're also responsible to be ourselves and to evolve ourselves. So we must set aside time, because we're not doing it naturally, to be ourselves. Go watch a sunset every once in a while and see what happens. Or go watch a sunset every single day and see how you change. In the beginning, you're just watching the sun drop. And then eventually it changes. And you can feel the connection to the light and why you're here and what it is that you're doing. You start to open up to that awareness just simply by getting out of the systems that are controlling us and being you. Be you. Some of us do it with breathwork. And we can get into the inhale, the exhale, the holds at the top, the pauses, we'll call it pauses at the top and the bottoms of the breath. Some of us do it with chanting. Some of us do it with exercise. Some of us do it with eating. Some of us do it with sex. Some of us do it with reading, walking, playing with animals, playing with your kids. These exercises that are outside of the paradigms that are structuring our reality is really where we're going to get the most growth. So when you get the downloads, when you get the channeled information in these states of being, pay attention to them, because they're more real than the rules and laws. I should have quoted laws. They're more real than the laws that we govern ourselves with on a day-to-day basis. And yes, we do need to practice, just like we don't move anymore, so we go to the gym to exercise to make up for the days of and the lifetime of movement that our body would naturally have. It's the same thing with our psyche and our creation abilities. Get into the point where you're not so fixated on the things you have to do and just be you, even if it's for 5 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day or an hour a day. And if you're doing things like kriyas, where you're going through the challenges, that's practicing to be able to expand that energetic frequency to take it with you into the challenges of the day, so that you are able to be you, be the full you, even when you're at work on the computer. You're able to imprint that frequency and take it with you into the world. that we all exist. Take care, everybody. I'm here every week. Raw realities. Take care. Bye-bye.